So I said, wow, God, that's great. So all of a sudden, when he went out the door, they all came up to me and they said, you know, we knew you had something there. We really felt it. And I said, yeah, you sure did, you know.
The next year, Marty Sklar created a large help wanted sign, inviting ghosts that wanted to continue practicing their trade in active retirement at the mansion to send their resume to the Ghost Relations Department.
Walt Disney realized that there wasn't going to be a finished attraction there in time for, you know, to meet up with the finishing of the facade. So he had Marty Sklar, who I think was a senior writer for the Imagineers then, and he had Marty put together a sign, and they posted it there, and it said, you know, notice restless spirits. It was basically an invitation to ghosts from around the world to come and take residence in the Haunted Mansion. And it was kind of humorous, and it was a dramatic sign, you know, red and blue letters and a big black sign there so that people could kind of get an idea what was to come.
By late 1965, work really began on the inside of the mansion. Disney legend Mark Davis wanted to add some humor to the attraction. Mark did dozens of concepts for Walt, all going with a more funny approach versus his counterpart Claude Coates' scary concepts.
The two schools of thought, let's make it funny. Walt wanted it, he didn't want to scare the hell out of people, but he wanted to just have a Halloween type show. So he was very particular on the feeling of the audience.
He had problems with it to a point because he had too many cooks spoiling the soup, and everybody was putting so much stuff in it, and he was taking it out.
And thus began the controversy of scary versus funny.
There was kind of an indecision about the Haunted Mansion. Would it be dark or would it be light? You know, would it be creepy or would it be funny? And it kind of comes down to Claude Coates versus Mark Davis. I think it was a little more involved in that.
Some of us kind of wanted it a little bit more scary, but the funny's kind of won out. So, like the stretching room, but the room starts stretching, and you set the mood. You get people are kind of, they come in and they're kind of scared, but then the room starts stretching, and then you see the the gags in the stretching portraits, and then bingo, all of a sudden the lights go out and you see the ghost hoses hanging from the rafters way up there. That scares them, you know. And so you just kind of you'd scare them, and then you'd bring them back real quick.
Without a true concept nailed down, Imagineers continued to present new concepts to Walt, with Mark Davis's humorous approach winning Walt's heart.
He did a lot of fun things like the duels and the drunk on the chandelier it was, and the cats warming them, the black cats warming themselves at the fireplace, and the drunk under the table. There were so many little things to look at, and that's something else that Walt liked, because he said, we go through at a certain pace so that there's always something more to see that you didn't see the first time.
Yes, well, we're doing a lot of portraits that change right in front of your very eyes. As a matter of fact, one of our paintings here is based on Greek mythology. This is Medusa. It's a very beautiful girl. She offended the goddess Athena, and as a result, Athena turned her into a gorgon. And as you may know, if you looked at a gorgon would turn you into stone.
Well, we sure don't want that to happen. What is, tell her about this thing here, will you, Mike?
Well, this is our elongating, stretching room.
They had to overcome some situations that were because of the placement of the attraction, like they had to get under train tracks, and so they built an elevator into the Anaheim Mansion, which is turned into a stretching gallery, but really you're going down to get under the train tracks.
And in this room, we also have some stretching portraits. Perhaps you'd like to look at those over there. These are some where
You pull them down, you should see what happens when the room gets longer, you get full-size portrait. This is my favorite here.
After 10 years of operation, Disney was really getting to know its audience and felt that a walk-through attraction could never meet the capacity it would need for the enormous audiences it would receive for this ghost house.
Walt
When he saw a better way to do something, discard the old way. It'll pay back when we do it right. And they're already beginning to reconstruct the idea for a ride instead of a walkthrough, because the walkthrough, they realized, would not have nearly the high capacity.
The park was so worried in operations that if they had people on a walkthrough, they would vandalize the mansion, or they would, so they said they've got to be in a conveyance. Well, we toyed with the idea about putting them in a boat, and the Haunted Mansion was underwater because of floods and stuff, but that didn't work.
Well, Claude wanted to have a bayou at the bottom and put them in a boat and take them boat up to where they could walk through. And Walt didn't like that idea. And so no matter what we thought of, it wasn't what Walt had in mind.
So then they finally put the Omnimover in, but the original way was that you would move 100 people at a time from one room to the next. So that's why if you were in this one room, the whole sea captain's room would come to life. And in the library, we had the whole library come to life, everything. The paintings came to life, the statues came to life, but you couldn't do that in a moving vehicle. So I really feel that the mansion suffered because it was put into a conveyance. Because what happens is when you're watching them dance, you can just tell they're on a little turntable and they're spinning. I mean, it's all very stiff animation.
Well, after the Monsanto Omnimover ride turned out to be really a good way to go through different show scenes. With an Omnimover, we could make scenes really, really interesting. The car could go down a steep hill and the body could turn backwards, and you don't know what's happening because it feels odd to ride backwards, and then find birds with glowing eyes and shaking dogs and shaking grave diggers. So the idea of a people mover system that will allow staging a very interesting show is still today a very unique thing. Nobody else in the world does things quite like the way Disney could design a show based upon the ability to move with what we call the Omnimover.
The people mover, there's obviously two different approaches. The one in Disneyland had what we call OBA, which is onboard audio. The people mover that is in Magic Kingdom in Florida has simply overhead speakers built into the covered awning. Therefore, they got around the hassles of the onboard audio. The way the onboard audio was done in those days, or dark ride audio, was little tape repeaters, basically a radio station type of technology where you have quarter-inch tape, and they broke up the track into individual sound zones, and the repeaters, there were banks and banks of them that would follow the progress of the cars within these narration zones and continually reset themselves for the next set of cars coming through.
In 1966, Walt went on television and presented the public with its first glimpse of the Haunted Mansion and the Museum of the Weird.
Will you tell her about some of these things, Ron?
These are going to be collected from all over the world, supposedly, and we're going to have man-eating plants, and we're going to have a coffin clock here that we're working on right now. We have a gypsy cart that comes to life with ghosts inside of it. We have a candle man. These are just things that are collected from all over the world. Just the weirdest things we could find.
You always had to show him something he'd never seen before. He didn't want to constantly trace himself. And I think that that's the one thing I offered to him was the imagination of doing something different. And not only that, standing up for it.
The Museum of the Weird was left on the storyboards. However, if you look closely at the wallpaper design that lines the mansion's hallways, you will see they are very close to the sketches done by Raleigh.
Every bit of the design is literally, ghouls and beasties looking at you. When I'm asked, well, count out the 999 happy haunts, we're going to come up short if we're talking about audio animatronics and illusion. So then I tell everyone, well, have you counted all the faces in the wallpaper? And they go, well, no. And I said, okay, there's your 999.
In the midst of a building boom, Walt Disney passed away.
The last time I saw Walt, I wasn't in a meeting with him, but he came over. He came into the model shop on a very simple meeting with some of the other people that were there. some of the other projects they were working on, and I walked by him. I didn't talk to him, but I sat in on the meeting, and his eyes had really receded. And I said to myself, he really looks sick. He really looks sick. And I just thought, he's not well. And that was before the news broke about what was wrong with him. And it was very sad, very sad.
He was always so enthusiastic about the next project. And he was always such an inspiration in that respect, you know, that we always have all this planned. And tomorrow, you know, when we just chew the fat, when he would be in just blue sky talking, well, he had 1,000 ideas. You know, he said, we'll do another mountain. He said, we'll have a dragon in it. And he said, in fact, we can have a baby dragon. He was just spur of the moment, you know, we can even do this, and then we can do some other things. You know, he was just always vibrant.
All new projects like the Pirates of the Caribbean, Tomorrowland, and the Disney World theme park in Florida were all being done without Walt, not to mention the Haunted Mansion. As it came closer to the opening day of the mansion, Exitensio was tapped to create the eventual script that would take guests through this ghostly retreat.
I didn't have people picking over my script to say. The input came on what we would do with Claude and Mark, etc., etc. When it came to the script, then it was mine.
The Ghost Host idea, which had been active since the attraction's walkthrough days, was first conceived as a cat and then a raven.
You're looking at a raven, and if you look very closely throughout the ride, the raven appears in many different sequences in the graveyard and going down through the trees, and in this sequence here. And I have found very early soundtracks that have the raven as narrator. Well, it's really obnoxious.
He chose the coward's way!
And that was the original recording that you heard at the end of the stretching room. And then my assumption is that the raven was to narrate the rest of the way through.
Veteran voiceover actor Paul Frees, who did work on many Disneyland attractions, including Adventure Through Inner Space, was chosen to be the Ghost Host.
Welcome. Welcome. Well, come in. Kindly step all the way in, please.
Paul was always my man. I loved to work with Paul. He was such a genius, and my association with him. Paul would come in for a recording session, and you spent the first half hour of the recording session listening to Paul tell how great he is.
How much time more do I have?
Oh, you got another 5 seconds, 8
seconds. Oh, that's like giving whiskey to an Indian. God bless you. I don't even want the money today. Take 2. Strike that last part. I'm waiting for slates.
All right, 6905, take 2.
And then we'd finally say, okay, let's get to work, Paul. And I'd give him the script, and he would just run with it.
Now you've noticed that this room contains 8 towering walls, no windows, and no doors. The world is locked out, and consequently, you are locked in.
You have the guests queued up in front, and they go through the front door. And then I wrote some of my best stuff.
When hinges creak in doorless chambers, and strange and frightening sounds echo through the halls.
Whenever candlelights flicker, where the air is deadly still.
That is the time when ghosts are present.
Practicing their terror with ghoulish delight.
With so many concepts and a definite riff between scary and funny, Exitensio, who just the year before wrote the famous Yo-Ho, Yo-Ho song for the Pirates of the Caribbean, came up with the idea of a song to help unify the polarizing attitudes of Claude Coates and Mark Davis.